So in today's video, I'm going to show you a really easy and sort of elegant way of painting mandalas like this in Procreate. During the video, I am using some watercolor brushes that I sell on my Etsy store, but it's totally optional and the mandala template thing is free and it'll work with any brushes you want. So the first thing we need to do is actually place in the mandala template. Now I'm using a watercolor paper texture that's already 4,000 pixels by 5,000, and that's the same size that I made the template. So basically all you gotta do is just go here to add, insert a photo, and then just insert the template like that. And there's a lot of ways that you can use this template, but just to keep this video simple, I'm gonna use the simplest method. And that's basically, we're gonna fill in just one segment here and then mirror it over, and then reflect that around the whole mandala. So if I open the layers panel here, you can see here's the template. It's set as the top layer. I actually want it to be a little bit further down here, and that's because I've already prepared a color palette and a sketch, basically of a design that I already had in mind. Now, if you want to basically paint exactly what you see in my video here, I'll put a free download for these in the description as well. Now, the placement of the layers is pretty important. So here's the paper texture, and this is part of the watercolor side of things. So basically, if you're using a paper texture, make sure that the template is just above the paper texture. Make sure it's set to multiply. The sketch can be above that as well. And the color palette, since the color palette has like a white background, I want to make sure it's set to normal with the transparency. Usually I set it to multiply, but you can see it darkens the colors because it's on top of that template. So I'm just going to make sure this is set to normal. And then to start painting, I want to make sure I'm painting below everything, below the template, and then of course below the paper texture. So for the brush, I'm going to use the scratchy dry round, and I'm sort of undersizing this. So I'm going to use it at a really small size and then with a lot of pressure. And I'm basically just going to do a long press to grab the colors from the palette, and then I'll fill in the design. And this is a design that didn't just come from nowhere. It's kind of something that I worked on for a while and fine-tuned it a little bit. And that's normal for patterns like this. And it may take 2 or 3 iterations of kind of refinement until you get a mandala that you're really happy with. And there we go. I think that looks pretty good. Now you'll see I just want to fill in this one segment, and in a few areas we went beyond the edge there. So I'm just going to cut that back with the eraser. Next, we need to duplicate this segment and mirror it over. So to do that, I'll just duplicate the layer it's on. Then I'll use the arrow tool. And first I'll flip it horizontally, and then I'll just move it over and do my best to line it up. And then to keep things kind of organized, I recommend merging those layers together. Now for my project here, I want to make a watercolor mandala. So at this point, I recommend doing a little bit of blending. So I'm going to switch off the mandala template just for a minute here. And these are the areas that I want to blend. So for that, I'm just going to grab the background water blender, and I'll just go in there at a really small size, and I'll just smooth over some of the weird looking overlapping strokes, and then also any gaps where they don't perfectly line up, I can just pretty much blend those until they disappear. And with the blending finished, we can turn the template back on and then continue with the mandala. So to keep this sort of efficient, usually what I do is I'll make another duplicate, and this time I'll move it to the bottom segment, flip it vertically, and then line it up as well. And then I'll merge these 2 segments together onto one layer, and then I'll duplicate that, and then I can use the arrow tool to rotate it, and it will just sort of rotate it on the center point like that. And this is how I can create the rest of the segments. There we go. And then just like we did with the first 2 segments, I'll switch off the template, merge all the mandala segments together onto one layer, and then I'll go in there with the blending brush and fix any errors like this. Now in some areas I do kind of want to erase it back, but generally I'm just doing this with the water blender. And at this point, the mandala could be finished, but I think it looks a little bit too perfect because we just reflected everything. So if you want, you can rough it up a little bit with the liquify tool. So I'll use the liquify tool like this, set to push, You can copy my settings here, and I'm just going to use this with a very light pressure, just basically resting my pencil on the screen, and I'll scramble it up a little bit. And again, this is just like an optional thing, but it does sort of enhance the kind of hand-painted quality of this. And just like that, this watercolor mandala is finished. And as usual, I've gone ahead and printed it out, and I'm just using my normal Canon Pixma and some watercolor paper. And I've got a few videos that explain my kind of technique here and how I overcome some of the issues with printing like this, and I'll put a link to that video at the end of this one. Now, another thing I've been sort of experimenting with lately is just creating these enhanced art prints. So in this case, I'm just painting on a little bit of gold acrylic paint just to make this more interesting. And yeah, that's pretty much it. If you made it to the end, just let me know in the comments. I really like to see that. Give this video a like if you think I've earned it. And here's the printing tutorial that I mentioned a moment ago, and then another watercolor tutorial that I think you'll love to watch next.